Thank you. Thank you all so much for volunteering your time and giving of your insights and your experience and your knowledge and maybe your failures or your missteps during your own HGSC experiences. We could not run this program without each and every one of you. We had an overwhelming response to those who wish to participate as mentors. So we are very, very grateful that you all are here and that you're giving of your time. And so we just want to take the moment to appreciate you. And now we'll get into the guts of the program. So we'll go through what the overview is of the SAMI mentoring program. And I can't see everybody's screens, but if you would give a raised hand, either the raised hand function or your physical raised hand on the screen. I'm going to expand so I can see more of the videos. If you have participated as a SAMI mentor before. Okay, looks like quite a few folks. That's okay if you haven't. We're going to go over everything and we have made a few changes, but it looks like a lot of you are old hat at this. So that's great to know as well. And how many of you, out of curiosity, again, raising either your virtual hand with the little icon, or you can do it on your screen if you have your camera on, participated as a mentee previously in the SAMI program? I see 1, 2, 3, 5. Oh, quite a few. Wonderful. Okay, so very experienced crowd. And feel free to share any experiences or advice as we go along in the chat for those of you who have done this before. But like I said, we made a few tweaks to the program from years past, hopefully for the better. And we'll just keep moving right along. All right. So what is the SAMI program? It stands for Student Alumni Mentoring Initiative, of course. And our program this year is really going to take place for 6 months, from October through April. We'll go through the actual outline of what each month will entail as we get forward in the program. But that will be pairing you with one student. It is a 1-to-1 student ratio. Like I said, we had incredible response from our alums. Over 400 alumni have raised their hands to mentor. So that's great. We'll be able to serve a lot of students, and we are so grateful for your service. The focus of the program is really on professional and personal development. You'll work with your mentee to establish what goals they hope to achieve during the mentoring connection and how to go about achieving those goals. We have asked both mentors and mentees to complete an application. Those complete applications give us the information that we need to help match you as best we can. Of course, you're here today because we're offering these voluntary trainings. We're offering 2 optional trainings for our mentors, and we are offering 2 required trainings for our mentees. We really want to put the onus of the relationship on the mentees so that they're getting the most out of the experience that they can, and so that they know the expectations that are on them. You're here to kind of help them along in this process and help them follow their goals. Again, this is kind of a boutique experience from my own personal experience working with alumni and student mentoring connections. This is a hand-matched process. So it's not perfect, but it's not a computer either. We're not using an algorithm. And in previous years, we've asked that a mentor not take on more than 2 mentees. But with the number of applicants that we've had, we are only doing a 1-to-1 match. So 1 alumni to 1 student going forward. All right, the timeline. As you all know, we put out the call to mentors starting in August. We've just closed the application process. So the applications for mentors closed on Sunday. And now we are opening with our mentee applications. They have the next week and a half to complete their applications. And we are advertising across all of our degree programs. Then during this month and at the beginning of October, we will have these mentor and mentee trainings. This week, the mentor trainings, and in the coming weeks, we will have 2 mentee sessions, 1 virtually and 1 in person. Again, we are advertising this across all of our degree programs. So that means that you might be matched with one of our new online leadership program participants. And that could mean that they're even closer to you if you are yourself are not close to the Cambridge area. In October, you will receive an email from us that will have your mentor-mentee match. We will send an email to the both of you, connecting you with one another. And at that point, the program will officially launch. You will be asked to set up your first meeting for October, and that will be where you really set the stage for the next 6 months of the mentoring connection. We also didn't want to leave it ambiguous. We hope that the 6-month mentoring connection will last from October through April, with a monthly meeting in each month, and each having at least one 30-minute connection meeting, whether it's by phone, by Zoom, by Teams, in person if possible, whatever you and your mentee decide. Throughout that period, you will hear regularly from Lisa and me with resources and suggestions for how to spend those meetings together. We're going to introduce a SMART goals setting framework for those of you who may not be familiar, and we'll share a little bit more about that in a few moments, but also other ways to really focus those meetings so that your mentee is getting the most out of that time. And then in April, the official mentoring connection will end. When the program ends, you will be asked to fill out a survey, of course, for your satisfaction. And also we will be setting up feedback sessions to hear how your experience went, what we can do for future years to improve the program, what went well, what didn't go so well. But certainly that will not be the only opportunity for feedback. So if you have feedback as the program goes along, anytime from October through April, we hope that you'll reach out to us and share what's going well or what you might need assistance with. That's the program overview. If you have a question on the program overview, feel free to put it into the chat now, or raise your hand and I can call on you and you can unmute and ask a question. Just going to pause for a moment if anyone's typing. Okay, we're going to move forward, but feel free to put questions as they arise in the chat box if you have them. The next set of slides is on understanding mentorship. It seems many of you have participated in this program before, so it shouldn't come as a surprise, but we just thought a good refresher of the do's and don'ts would be helpful for all. So, of course, help your mentee initiate their responsibility. They are the ones that are going through this program, are getting an education, and are working towards their own personal and professional goals. So help them take the initiative to make those goals and set those goals, and then listen to them. Actively listen, make sure that you're providing suggestions, maybe giving experiences from your own HGSE lifetime, and make it clear that the mentee is not expected to follow your suggestions. It would be nice if everyone followed your recommendations, but it's certainly not an expectation. You're not a professor, although maybe you are, just not one of their professors, and help them really make progress against their goals. Again, we'll introduce the SMART goals framework if that will be helpful for you, but that's something that you and your mentee will discuss in those initial meetings of how best to frame your time together. Again, don't assume that your advice will be followed. It would be great if they did, but they are individuals and they are, it's not required that they follow your advice or suggestions. Don't ignore their objectives. Make sure that it's clear what their objectives are and what they hope to gain from this mentoring connection. It's not going to be a perfect match. Like I said, it is a one-to-one connection that we are hand matching based on responses from one survey. So we do hope there's diversity in the matches. We do hope there is depth and breadth of thoughts and opinions, and that you all bring those to the connection. And certainly do not hesitate to reach out to Lisa or myself with any questions or concerns or challenges or speed bumps, whatever the case may be. As you all know, a mentor is not a therapist. A mentor is not a career coach, although the mentoring connection can look similar to a career coach in some ways. A mentor is not an academic advisor. HGSC has a multitude of resources for our students. And if you feel like there are questions that are venturing into one of these other arenas, say a student is asking your opinion on what courses to take, certainly you can provide your suggestions and recommendations, and they may even be seeking those recommendations and suggestions. But for further reflection, I would encourage your mentee to reach out to their faculty advisor. There is a pool of faculty advisors this year for each program that they have access to meet with. There are what's called HGSE guides this year as well that will help students figure out what courses are best for their future professional and personal goals. The Career Services Office also offers that support as well, particularly with goals of specific roles or industries in mind. So feel free to refer out your mentee to any number of these resources. And if you're not sure which resource to guide them to, again, feel free to reach out to us and we will help you. You will not have all the answers, but maybe you will. It's okay if you don't have all the answers, and there are other supports in place to help these students. Okay, like I mentioned, one framework that we'll be sharing with you, which we think might be very helpful, is the SMART Goals framework. Again, by show of hands, virtually or otherwise, how many of you are familiar with the SMART Goals framework? Okay, just looking through all the pages of videos. Okay, it seems like most folks are familiar. If you're not familiar, we will be sharing more from these slides so that you have this framework at your fingertips. Maybe there's something you prefer. That's okay too. You're welcome to work with your mentee in whatever framework feels best to satisfy the goals that they're hoping to achieve over that 6-month period. This is just one way that we think might be helpful for you to sit down with your mentee in that first meeting and structure your conversation. You know, what are you hoping to achieve? What is the time frame that you're hoping to achieve this? How are you going to know that you're being successful? How do you know that you're going to have success towards these goals? What are you going to use to measure your impact towards these goals? And really the onus, again, should be on the mentee to come up with how they're going to attain these things. You're there to listen and guide and make suggestions based on your own experiences and insights. One of the things that they'll certainly be looking to you for, of course, is also networking and opening your network to them based on these goals. So it'd be helpful to, at the outset, to know what they're hoping to achieve. Okay. That is the basics of mentorship, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. So I appreciate your time as we brush up on this. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or I will pause. And if you'd like to raise your hand and ask a question aloud, you may do so now. Okay, we're going to move into the program expectations. What's expected of both the mentor and the mentee? So as I've mentioned a few times already, the basic commitment is just one 30-minute meeting per month. If you're local to your alum or you're in the Cambridge area, feel free, or to your student rather, or you're local to the Cambridge area, feel free to meet in person if you'd like. This will really be set at the outset of your mentoring connection in that first meeting. Decide what works best for all of you. What works best? Would you rather just have a phone call for 30 minutes once a month? Would you like to do a face-to-face Zoom or a Microsoft Teams or any number of those working options that are now available to us post-COVID, during COVID, all of these things. Or you can meet in person, like I said. But that's the basic expectation. If your mentee wishes to meet more frequently, that's up to you and your mentee to decide if you have the bandwidth. You are certainly not expected to commit any more time than that. Certainly help them to define and discuss the goals and the expectations of the program. Set a set of rules for yourselves that you're going to follow through those 6 months. What type of communication cadence are you going to follow? All of this is best discussed in that first meeting so that you've set those expectations up at at the front end of your relationship. However, if you run into any issues, for example, life happens and you're all very busy professionals, or busy people with individual lives. If for any reason you are not able to commit to 30 minutes a month after you've gotten started in the program, no fear. Feel free to reach out to us and we will help troubleshoot. Like I said, we have 400 folks who raised their hand for this opportunity. So certainly there will be folks who have maybe additional bandwidth if you find yourself not being able to commit fully to this program. And that doesn't mean that we'll remove you from our lists forever either. We understand that life happens. To that end, feel free to communicate with us regularly. Lisa and I are always here as a resource and happy to troubleshoot, or if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us and we're happy to help navigate those questions. And as always, be as open and honest as you can. You have gone through a similar experience to your student mentee, whether it was many years ago or just last year, whether your degree program had a different acronym, or you participated in the PhD program and now you're mentoring a master's student. All of your experiences are valid and relevant and insightful because that's the point of this mentoring connection. Now, what are we asking of the students? So we are asking the same of the students to commit those 30 minutes once a month. If you find that your mentee is being unresponsive and you've not heard from them, especially if you're concerned about them, again, please feel free to reach out to us and let us know that you haven't heard from your mentee or that your mentee has been unresponsive for several months. We want to make sure that we're following up with the students, also to make sure there's not a further issue that we need to ask one of our colleagues in the student services to help us with. We're also asking that they attend one required training. We want them to feel ownership in this relationship and connection and come prepared to meet with you. And really, it's their goals at the end of the day. You're there to help guide them and give them advice and share your own experiences. But at the end of the day, this is their experience and they should take some ownership for driving the connection. They also, we want to make sure, need to understand that there is no obligation from any of you to hire them in any full-time or part-time or internship capacity. It would be great if all mentors had the ability to just hire up their mentees. Certainly, if I'm wearing my career services hat, that would be the ultimate goal, but that's not how mentoring works, and that is not an expectation. We would love for you to open your networks, connect via LinkedIn if that's something that's of interest, and make connections if that's helpful for your students' goals. But you do not need to feel any obligation to hire your mentee. Hopefully you didn't feel that way anyway, but we're making that point clear. Again, they need to have an agreed upon communication schedule with each of you and stick to it. They will be asked the same if life happens and they're unable to continue through the program, that they need to reach out to us and let us know. As I've mentioned, things come up. These are human connections after all, so we do expect that there will be bumps in the road. If you haven't heard from your mentee, if there's a situation where you feel uncomfortable and you'd like to talk to us further about it, please feel free to reach out. You can always reach at least Lisa or me at that alumserve@gse.harvard.edu email. Throughout the program, we will be sending resources and suggestions for how you structure your time together with your mentee, but you don't need to follow our advice either. It's really just to help you. We want to make sure that you have the resources to be successful in this volunteering opportunity and that it doesn't cost you any more time than you've already offered and that is expected in this program. Okay, any questions on the mentoring program, logistics, structure? You guys are a great group. I love this. All right. Well, then without further ado, I would like to introduce a wonderful colleague of yours, an alumna who is one of our HGSC Alumni Council co-chairs, Claudia Bach, EDM 91, EDM 92, and EDD 94. And Claudia will share with us a little bit of some of her experiences from her 10 years in participating as a mentor in the SAMI program, and some top tips and tricks and suggestions to help you all be successful. So Claudia, I am going to pause my video there, or my presentation, and allow you to have the stage.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emily. I've just started to come to know Emily, and I will tell you everything she's promised to do and promised to be as a help to all of us, she will be. She has just been a delight for me to come to know. So thank you for that very generous introduction. I thought you were going to ask me how long I'd been a mentee, and I was going to have to be embarrassed to say, I don't remember. I think it's more than 10 years. I also wanted to find out who else on this presentation had already been a mentor and a mentee. And so I'm happy you did that. And so this will be just my personal experience that I will relate. And I would imagine that within this huge group of very experienced mentees and mentors, there are a lot of people who will have much more to share and who will be likely to even express a difference of opinion from what I'm going to say. So I hope all that happens. I was given by Emily and Lisa 2 questions. And the first was to relate 2 different experiences I've had with mentees. One that led to a more longer term relationship and one that was less longer term. And in the first category then, there were 2 mentees I will remember forever, and with whom I've had a longer term experience. In fact, one of those mentees, a woman, is still a mentee, and I'm wondering if she's even here today, because I think she's aspired to be a mentor. So if she's here, welcome, you know who you are. And the other was a fellow, and we had a longer term too that extended beyond the 6 months and into really the following and beyond. And I think the reason that those were successful was because, one, even though we were in different programs, obviously different gender, was because we did a lot together during the short time we were there. In both cases, this was pre-pandemic, so we met frequently. I always invited them to an early lunch and suggested that we maybe meet once a month at lunch in person, and that sometimes happened and didn't. But the mentees in both cases were eager to take me to other experiences. We went to Askworth forums together. Those could be done virtually too. So those could still happen today, either in person or virtually. That one mentee took me across the river to some activities she was involved in other graduate schools. And so the more we did together, I think the more it built a relationship that was more and more meaningful. In the other case, and I don't think I had the option of reporting this back to Emily and to Lisa, but because they weren't here at the time, it just faded away. At the beginning, we were very excited to meet, and we shared all the things that Emily's gone through about how often we'd meet and her goals and what we would be doing and seeing together. But I think, which I will get back to in a second, I think life at Harvard just took over for this mentee. We never had a falling out. It was just that we sort of faded away from each other. She was extremely busy and active, which is very typically what can happen. And I think she didn't have time. Maybe she was sorry she even signed up for a mentoring experience to begin with. So that one didn't work. But I will say in virtually every other case, while there were degrees of involvement, every other case was a successful relationship. And these were people from different countries and from different programs. And it has been one of the most favorite things I do. I have loved every minute of it. So the second question was some tips hot tips for mentoring, as Emily said. I don't know about that, but what I'm going to tell you will maybe not conflict, but be an expansion on some of the things that Emily said, in that in every case, except for the one who faded away, there was a cycle that was the same for every single mentee. And this is where my fellow mentors might come back and say, well, that wasn't what happened in my experience. But it began with the fall being just this thing of all these wonderful courses to sign up for, and all the other bright and sparkly things that you could do. You could volunteer for this, you could do that. So in the beginning, some of our 30-minute promise to each other was less in some cases, because the person was just so full of things to do and so many activities to involve in that I sort of said, listen, being a mentee is not I am not an obligation for you. So you don't have to meet with me at a certain level or whatever, just because you're supposed to. It has to be rather if you need me, if you feel that I can be important in helping you for whatever reasons. And so I think that's an important thing to remember, because later on then in the sort of late fall, the workload becomes even bigger. There's just more and more to do as midterms and assignments and papers and final exams just really put the heat on. And so I think it becomes a period of exhaustion. And so I suggest, rather than having that nice little comfortable lunch, that we have a quick phone call. If anything comes up, let's just talk and make sure that I'm still there if I can be of help in any way. Some people headed off to home, and other people didn't really go home. They signed up for the J term, the term between the two terms. And so then again, we were not in that constant conversation. But spring term happens. And the first thing I have to say is that in terms of goal setting, the goals that maybe were being set in the fall are going to change, because Harvard very consciously wants to mix and with your mind, wants to upset you in terms of what you thought you wanted, in terms of where you thought your career was going. It wants you to begin to question, because you took a course, because you talked to the professor, because you had friends. You suddenly aren't so sure anymore. New opportunities are surfacing, and also new questions about what matters to you surface. And so when I would meet with the mentees then to talk about course selection, they were much more interested in what I had to say, because they wanted to talk through. They realized that the courses they might have automatically signed up for, maybe they weren't going to do this second time around. Maybe they wanted to further a course that they had taken in the fall. And so it's a great time for some very rich discussions in that first part of the spring term. And it's a part that I enjoy very, very much. At least that was my experience. And so the term begins, and what they know already, because that first term passed in a minute, that this spring term is also going to go very, very fast. And so they have two huge concerns. One is, what courses do I take, which we've already talked about. But the other is, I've got to find a job. What comes next? What comes after this experience? And so again, I think you become, as a mentor, very important in just listening and maybe asking questions about, well, what are you thinking now? And what do you think might happen? But there's a panic about getting a job. And so again, my experience only has been that I can say to everyone I've mentored, everybody has had a job I've mentored by midsummer, which means maybe not by commencement, don't panic, but by midsummer, every single person had not just a job, but a job that really mattered to them, one that they were really excited about. And so I see that cycle is really important in terms of goals changing, in terms of not always being as regular, and the need for the mentor to be flexible as your mentee is going through all of these changes, which are very purposely, I think, designed by Harvard to happen to a person who's going through an extraordinary experience at Harvard, at the Ed School in particular. So be flexible. And I also at the very beginning like to give a little card, a small little gift that is Harvard. It could even be like a paperclip, piece of something from Harvard. So that's, I think, the main things. And I'd be very curious to hear, because I'm sure other people have had other experiences. So thank you, Emily. I'll turn back to you.
Thank you, Claudia. We so appreciate your experiences and sharing what works and what maybe hasn't worked. If I don't want to put anyone else on the spot, but if you have something, advice for this group and you've been a mentor in the past, feel free to put your advice in the chat box now, or raise your hand and I can call on you and you can come off mute and share your experience. We're also towards the end of our presentation, so we will be giving you the gift of time back unless you have any additional questions. Again, feel free to use the raise hand function or type in the chat any questions for Claudia, for Lisa and me, for one another. And I'll just leave it for a few moments to see. But that just means that Lisa and I have done our job, and Claudia.
I hope so.
Oh, thank you, Elise. Okay, well, without further ado then, thank you all again for giving us your time today, in addition to the coming commitment of being a SAMI mentor. Cleta, again, I hope I'm not mispronouncing that, said that they've had 2 international students whose families couldn't come for graduation, and you're going, oh, that is so nice that you were able to be there at commencement for your mentees. That's so nice. Hopefully we'll be able to replicate that experience again this year. So thank you all for your time. If you have questions, reach out. I would expect that we'll send a follow-up email with this recording and slides early next week. So to answer that question, I was able to preempt that question too. All right, thank you all so much. It's a pleasure to see you all, and we'll be in touch very soon. Thanks again.